We're going to talk now with Mike Frotten. As I mentioned, Mike's a veteran in mortgage banking and is in the field, and certainly as as a regional vice president, these issues are dear to his heart. So, Mike, why don't you kind of share a little bit about what you've seen over the 20-some-odd years that you've been doing mortgage banking on this entertainment, the entertainment approach that many companies do versus the issue of now getting down at a targeted level.
Yeah, hi, Pat. Thanks for letting me join the call. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think all of us have experienced those events where you fly in or drive in to some location and you listen to a speaker for an hour or so. I think there was just an event in Las Vegas last week, the Mastermind, and Tony Robbins was there. But I guarantee if you ask some of the people that were there last week, tell me 5 things that you've changed in your daily approach. Probably hasn't happened because, it's fun to hear speakers, but as Pat was saying, my experience is that you really don't develop long-lasting changes and new skills or enhanced skills by just approaching it as a one-time event. Training, it's something you have to commit to. It's like advertising. It makes no sense to put one ad in the newspaper or television. It's something you have to commit to. Why does Coca-Cola still advertise today? I think everyone knows who Coca-Cola is, but training it's the same sort of process. You have to commit to it and continue to go back to my analogy about one-time events versus a process is and Pat likes sports analogies, so I'm going to use one here.
Okay.
So pick whatever sport is your favorite, baseball, football, whoever. I live here in Cape Cod, and I love the Red Sox. So the Red Sox won the World Series last year. They were the best in their given field. They reached the pinnacle. There was no other level of success they could have attained. So that was October. And then in March, where do they all show up again as a team? They end up in Florida at spring training, and what do they do when they get there? They practice. They practice the fundamentals. So, if a world champion thinks that that's important, I think it's just as important in sales to continue to go back to, 1, let's master the fundamentals, and then 2, as you were saying, Pat, start to tailor it more towards the individual needs with some of the tools that are available.
Mike, when you look at it at the manager level, and you certainly have seen it not just from a corporate standpoint, but down, at the regional level, what would you tell a branch manager, in other words, the local supervisor, what is it that they need to do to really be committed to adding training to, improving their branch performance levels?
Yeah. We've had a lot of discussions about this. This is something that I'm passionate about, and I think it's an area that not just our industry, but I think any sales manager, a field manager, or a branch or a regional manager, it's often an overlooked area of attention. A lot of people get promoted to that role because they were a pretty good salesperson, but I've never taken that approach. I call it the Tommy Amaker rule. It's another sports analogy, I apologize. But so Tommy Amaker was the men's basketball coach at the University of Michigan in 2006. I was reading an article in the newspaper that was talking about the school had fired him as the coach. He went to Harvard, and he's had some success now. But so when he was at the University of Michigan, the reason why he was fired, the knock on him was that his seniors, when they graduated, weren't any better at basketball than when they started as freshmen. So I see the same thing with sales management roles. The only purpose for a sales manager is to make sure that he's responsible now for those people that report to him or her, and their sole role and function is to make sure that the people they're responsible for are better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year. So I've seen a lot of training efforts come to a hard stop. One, because there wasn't any focus given to the sales management role to make sure that they know what good looks like and they're prepared and have been trained on how to coach and mentor. And two, this happens a lot too, where there'll be a company-wide effort or some initiative, and there isn't any buy-in by the field managers because they were overlooked, or they weren't consulted or brought into their process and their opinion considered. And so whatever money was spent on that initiative, it was a waste of time, because as soon as you know what happens, you've probably all experienced this. You go out in the field, everyone gets back home, and all it takes is one or two managers to say, I don't care what they said in corporate, but I'm not supporting that, and we're not doing it that way. So I think a lot of, you've seen that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Right. So, Mike, when you say it, and like the first quarter results for mortgage bankers came out just the other day, the average production per loan officer, and again, I'm talking about the retail side, this also applies to the wholesale side, it's now down to 1.7 units per originator on the retail side. When you see those types of numbers, and you know that really the training being done at the local level is either non-existent or hit and miss, don't you think companies would kind of now wake up that we need to get serious about, we're going to hold sales management responsible for how they coach their individual originators?
You'd think, but I don't know if that happens in practice. What's the typical reaction in a time like this? Let's throw more bodies at the problem. I would rather take my time to find the right person, and this is a concept I think everyone should be aware of. As Pat was saying, there's a process to developing people and becoming better and developing skills in certain areas. And when I worked at Dale Carnegie, they would call it's the cycle of self-development. And so, Pat, you were hitting on all these areas, and the first phase of that cycle is that if, so I'll give you an example. I'd like to be a scratch golfer, like Pat was saying.
Yeah.
I never will be, because I haven't entered that first phase of that cycle. And in order to become a scratch golfer, my want to would have to be bigger than my like to. And if you can find people that have the attitude of, I want to become better at something, I know I can become better, I will become better, someone shows me how to. Someone that just is so hungry that eat a bug if you ask them to. When I'm recruiting and hiring, that's the attitude I'm looking for, because you can take people like that, and you probably already have them in your organization, but if they have that attitude, then they're open to listening to the knowledge, the concepts, the ideas that you share with them or deliver to them in a training session. But if you think about most training or college classes or seminars you've ever been to, that's where it typically stops. The loan officer licensing, you take a test at the end, and what does it do? All it does is prove that you can remember answers to 125 questions. It hasn't gauged your skill level. It hasn't proven that you can go out and sell a prospect. But if you complete those two phases of that cycle and process, then, and I used to make sure that I was always concerned we weren't giving our folks time enough to practice, and you touched on this. Practice is so important, purposeful practice over a period of time, backed up with positive coaching and reinforcement on specific areas. If you can spend enough time practicing, the book Good to Great, it takes 10,000 hours to become great at something if you have a basic skill. 10,000 hours of practice. So if you complete that third phase and you spend enough time practicing, then you take that original want to, and now it becomes a skill. And once you complete that cycle of self-development, it becomes self-perpetuating. I've run 3 marathons, and I made my 2 out of my young kids run one with me because I just want them to experience that process. It's not about running the marathon. It's about the time and effort it takes to prepare to run a marathon.
So, Mike, do you see now, when you look at that, in the big picture, especially let's talk about prospecting because, again, that's what we have found as a topic, that we want these originators to go out there and prospect. But in many cases, you know, if they've been in the business a while, and when you consider that the average age of the originator is in his early 50s, so they've been in the business for a while. And so this issue of they might be prospecting in a way that doesn't really match with what goes on today. For instance, certainly what we see when you're looking at, from an analytical view, the prospecting side of it, the customers have, you know, ADD. I mean, you got to be a lot faster, a lot quicker, even to get, you know, permission to even discuss more. So when you see this issue of originators and they're kind of stuck in the old ways, you know, is it really a sales training issue? Is sales training ever going to correct it? And obviously what I would kind of say is no, they wouldn't. But, you know, the reality is, you know, how can sales training really improve that person's performance level, which is really what it counts?
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking back. One of the things we used to do at InterFirst, we would offer this for our customers, where it was a telephone sales skills seminar. And, you know, so we assume all the people that work for us have mastered the fundamentals. And we would clear it with the company. And what we would do, we would play secret shopper. And it was shocking the number of times that people didn't even ask for our name or how we heard about them as a company, if we were referred, just missing on some of the basic things.
Right.
I'll give you another example. So here at Stonegate, we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the conversion rate was pretty poor. And I don't know, but I'm guessing, because I just started with them when they made that buying leads from different sources. My gut tells me that maybe people weren't trained on what to do with the lead, how quickly to respond. Did someone even think about developing a phone script for them, so not to turn them into robots, but to give them a track to run on and you know, move the lead down the funnel a little bit. Yes, I've experienced that firsthand.
Well, Mike, when you look at it, and you raised a really good point about, you know, scripting, and certainly that's an issue, you know, when I'm doing sales trainings, you know, you definitely get pushback from salespeople regarding the scripting side of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I still use, I develop my own scripts to this day when I'm calling to recruit someone, not to sound canned, but it's practice.
Right.
So I'll develop a script. I'll practice it on people. How does it sound? Let me change this, and then change this verbiage, and I'll practice it, you know, a dozen times before I ever pick up the phone.
Right. So when you're saying, Mike, when you're saying pushback with originators who may not want to adopt scripting, what's that usually kind of say to you about the originator?
Well, you know, I'd revert back to that analogy about spring training. I don't care who you are, unless you've converted every realtor in town and captured every lead in the city. You know, maybe you should be more open to honing your skills a little bit more. So I'll give you an example. I hired a manager in New Jersey, and I love this person for a couple of different reasons. One, a goal is a discrepancy. It's a discrepancy between where you are today and where you'd like to be tomorrow, right? So I look for people that create their own discrepancies. So I'll give you an example. So this person is in the middle of becoming an EMT, just because she set a goal for herself that that's what she wants to do. And then in the middle of that, she's learning how to play the guitar.
All right.
Right? So
right. Okay.
Whether she's done it consciously or subconsciously, she's going through that cycle of self-development on her own just because she enjoys that experience and can't get enough of it. So I would always look for people like that have proven to themselves, figured out on their own how to accomplish some goal in their life. Because usually they can transfer that attitude and skill towards this job. So, you know, if people are that resistant and digging their heels into change, you know, maybe they're just not a fit. But and I've always been a believer and a fan of showing people what good looks like. That you look at, we're going to share this with you as a concept, not to beat you over the head, but if it helps you close 1 or 2 more loans a month, it might be worth paying attention during the next hour.
Okay. Well, they're really great points, and certainly from a practical standpoint, the science would tell you, I mean, we've looked at it, what you're really talking about is an individual's drive component, and the person you're using as an example obviously has the drive to improve themselves as a person. And there are issues that can be identified during the interview side of it. And certainly what we would say is that, you know, look at the talent and then look at their willingness to commit to really change, because when you look at mortgage banking, for sure, we're having change every day. And so if you're having people that resist that and don't want to change and want to relive mortgage banking 20 years ago, they're really going to have a difficult time. They are not a sales training issue. It really is more of a motivational issue. And sales training really cannot correct any of the motivational side. That has to be at the individual level. Mike, we have a couple questions that people have asked. And when you have a room full of adult learners and you have a wide range of experience, how do you engage the more experienced person in an activity they may feel silly? What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, when I worked at Dale Carnegie, I would get this every time I walked into a room, because you'd stand up in front of the room or on stage, and especially an experienced group of salespeople that sit there with their arms crossed. So until they become active listeners, there's really no point in moving forward. And I would do that. I would use that analogy about spring training and get the arms uncrossed before I would start, and drive home the point that unless you're even if you were at the top of your field and had reached the pinnacle of success, it's probably a good idea to continue to go back and learn new skills and focus on the fundamentals. And that's in a group setting, but individually, I'll tell you, as we matured as an organization in InterFirst, and we were committed to training, we conducted training all the time and used Pat to help us. And one of the ways you helped me, Pat, was the tool that we used to identify individual traits. And that was such a helpful coaching tool, because then one-on-one you could really drill down into that person's specific needs and wants and approach that was going to work with them. That, to me, I think we turned a corner. We were great at delivering it in a group setting, and that really helped us mature and us improve as managers, right, when we could drill down into individual needs.
Yeah, Mike, certainly that's what I find with other companies that we've been involved with, that when they really are serious about training and coaching, they need to be at the individual level. And what's wonderful today is a lot of those tools, and we certainly have some of them, will help really this whole issue of what is the gap that the person needs to improve upon. And unfortunately, most times at many companies, those types of conversations really never occur. And that's a good use of where assessment testing can come in to give you that type of development component. So yeah, we see that as a really popular, strategy for sure. And I guess one comment I would say about when you have a room full of adults where you have very experienced people and then you have, somebody that's really advanced, one of the things that I use as a facilitator is to get that person to become, to show the examples of what really works. I mean, you can tell when you're doing sales training, those that do have a higher level expertise, the more you get them involved as almost like a sub-teacher, the better it is for the group, because that person has a reputation within the company anyway, and so you can really hone in on points. But I would not leave the person to be bored. I would have that person become active participant. Otherwise, it doesn't send a very good message to the other people.
Yeah, that's a great point. And if I can back up to that question again, I agree. If you wait until the day that you deliver it to address those senior leaders, and every company has the informal leaders that the rest of the sales force looks up to, if you haven't addressed them before everyone gets to the room, you made a mistake. And so I would approach the folks I had in my organization that fit that role, and I'd let them know, look at, whether you realize it or not, a lot of eyes are on you, and I'm leaning on you. This is an important initiative for us. Senior management is counting on us to improve in this area, whatever it might be, whatever the initiative might be. But I'll let them know, look at, we're counting on you as a senior leader.
One thing I did want to just kind of add is that what I do when I'm doing, group training, and I would suggest for any of you that have to do it at various meetings, is I always survey the individual people, and I ask for who is your, top performers or whatever it is, so I can get them so I can tap in and have them active with it. So when the actual class occurs, you've really kind of engaged them. That is one thing that I find has really worked a lot. And so this will prevent this issue of somebody bored to death sitting in the back and everybody's paying attention to them and not paying attention to the new instruction. So I would say in the design of the class, what I find is when you survey and ask them, kind of what their suggestions are, the sooner you get them involved, the better off it's going to go for you as an instructor. Mike, anything else that you would like to share today from all of your experience in training and how to be competitive in today's market?
If there's one lesson I've learned in sales, and unfortunately the hard way sometimes, and I get the scar tissue to to prove it.
Okay.
If there's one important attribute sales managers and salespeople need to have, it's a sense of urgency. And man, I learned that lesson the hard way. And until I developed it, I really didn't experience true success and my full potential as a sales manager. And it can be learned. It can be learned, and there are things that you can do. And I've got an example that'll take too long to tell, but yeah, I think that's one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my career.
Well, Mike, I think that's a really great point, and I think that applies to everybody, throughout the industry. And I think with today's performance levels, when you look at the industry results, urgency is needed more than ever. So that translates into, finding people that do have that urgency, but obviously also moving them up to the next level, which is obviously the key to having excellent results. Just a couple last things. For those on the call today, we are providing a free use of one of the knowledge assessments that we have that analyzes the consultative sales knowledge of the originator. And our next webinar is July 9th, and we're going to talk about coaching, never coach poorly again. We've done a lot of work in this area, and we certainly know what it takes from a competency level to be a good coach, and also how to deliver good coaching to your employees. So have a great day. Any questions that you might have, certainly email me. I'd be glad to answer them. And certainly, thank you for attending our call today. And thank Mike Frotten for being part of it. Thank you.